It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Ensuring that you are aware of what your objective limit is, because you need to walk into these auctions, with a limit, because you can get carried away when there's emotion involved, there's competition involved, and sometimes even ego, Craig, involved. So you really need to self-regulate at some point.
And that is Adrian Bo in Sydney this morning on the Real Estate Breakfast as we continue to talk about your local real estate property market. Friday, it is October the 3rd. First Home Guarantee 5% deposit scheme. It's a federal government scheme that allows first home buyers to purchase with just 5% deposit instead of the usual 20%. For single parents or legal guardians, it may allow you as low as a 2% deposit in some cases. The government acts as a guarantor for a portion of the loan, and that is important because some people think that it's for a larger slice of the cake. And also, importantly, income caps and participant levels have been removed, making it more open to buyers. And property caps have been increased in many areas to reflect current market values. So who is eligible for this to qualify? Well, you generally must be a first home buyer. I have a slight issue with that, the first home buyer scenario, because there are cases where somebody may have gone through a divorce 10, 15 years ago. They've been out of the property market for that amount of time. I think there should be some discretion around that. But anyway, we'll talk about that on another day. You got to be an Australian citizen or permanent resident over 18, intend to live in the property. So this is not an investment property. You'll be living in it. Higher price caps. Now, for example, the cap in Sydney and New South Wales capitals and also regional centres is now $1.5 million, which means 75 grand and you can secure a $1.5 million property. But that is a really big mortgage. That is 1.425. The biggest mortgage I ever had across two different properties was $400,000 a piece, which was scary at the time. Okay, that was 15 plus years ago, but over 1.4 million, a very, very big number. So let's go to Sydney and catch up right now with Adrian Bo. And good morning to you, Adrian. Welcome to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning. Yeah, what do you think? That number, huge number on 5% deposit. It's all about servicing it, of course, at the end of the day.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Craig. Absolutely. Well, I don't know if you're aware of this, but if you look at, say, just an even $1 million mortgage at the current interest rate, have a guess at what just the interest component alone would be over a 30-year period for just $1 million mortgage.
Astronomical.
Well, it's $1.1 million. So $1 million mortgage turns into $2.1 million alone. And that's in a low interest rate environment, given the cash rate's at 3.6, bringing, the retail rate at sort of something with a 6 in front of it. Yeah, the interest component alone just on $1 million, to quote you, is certainly astronomical. The threshold has risen. It was 900, bringing it up to now 1.5. So what I noticed, certainly as an auctioneer, when the 900 threshold was in place, basically everything worth around 800 automatically became 900 and people capped out at that. And I think the same thing's going to happen to anything worth around 1.4. It's probably going to creep up to 1.5, which could have, a negative effect potentially on what they're trying to achieve.
Yes, indeed, because negative equity is a real risk when it comes to property values. They only have to dip just very marginally and you might end up owing more than what your home is worth. I just want to come back to, the times that we live in. It's like COVID was a long time ago in people's minds, and it was one of those shock events that took place. But it can happen again. Like, we get into that situation of what happened in COVID 2021. Things go hellishly wrong. It's not beyond us to land there again. And I do worry about these very large mortgages that people will take on.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, when we say it could happen again, it will happen again. I mean, I've been in the industry 35 years and, I call them black swan events and I've seen plenty of them. And whether it's the pandemic, the GFC, 9/11, it tends to come around every 7 to 10 years. And when that does occur, I've certainly auctioned off properties where owners have openly admitted, look, this is not going to be a capital gains or a profit exercise. It's just purely a reduction exercise. And I will be taking a haircut. But the opportunity cost of holding it is just too high. I want to move on and do other things. So I've seen it in real time. And absolutely, there's anecdotal evidence that I've been exposed to.
When I mentioned that negative equity risk, have you got something that you just sort of throw up, which is in the back of your mind, a really bad example of that in the Sydney property market? Somebody bought at the peak of the market, and then the dominoes effect started kicking in with the interest rates, and you knew, hey, we've got to sell this property, otherwise they could end up losing the lot.
I find the main categories that occurs, Craig, is either if someone bought it off the plan and the construction gets delayed and then the value does depreciate because, number one, they've bought a brand new product off plan where the marketing was very seducing. And then the reality is it's a brand new product. And then secondly, if it's located in a high density area, an example in Sydney would be Zetland, where it's, it's a high density area in terms of apartments. Basically, by the time the property's ready and complete, you're competing against other properties because there's multiple construction occurring. So, yeah, absolutely, it does occur.
Now, you are an auctioneer there based in Sydney. I reckon what we should do is have a look at some of the auction tips for buyers and sellers. So when we come back, we'll ask Adrian some of these great questions and he might be able to help you out if you're heading into an auction this coming weekend. That is next.
Every morning from 6 a.m. across Australia, we deliver you the latest property news, commentary and predictions from Perth to Cairns and from Melbourne to Brisbane, 7 days a week. Listen to expert perspectives with exclusive real estate conversations and supercharge your knowledge base with us.
And it is a Real Estate Friday. We are talking to Adrian Bo. He's an auctioneer there in Sydney. And yes, let's go over some of these great tips that you've got for buyers. They might be heading into an auction. They might be going to one of yours tomorrow.
Well, really, there's a couple of tips that, come to mind, Craig, after, conducting over 6,000 auctions over a 30-year period. One is certainly ensuring you've conducted all your due diligence. Number two, I think talking with your broker or your bank and ensuring that you are aware of what your objective limit is, because you need to walk into these auctions, with a limit, because you can get carried away when there's emotion involved, there's competition involved, and sometimes even ego, Craig, involved. So you really need to self-regulate at some point. The other tip would be, and this is based on experience where I've gone and congratulated a purchaser and they've said, well, I'm really glad I got it because frankly, I didn't have $1 more. And then I've commiserated the underbidder and the underbidder said, look, I could have gone higher, but that buyer seemed so confident and looked like they were never going to stop, And the only tip that I've observed is the person who bought it bidded confidently, bidded loudly, and they bidded rapidly. And that created that impression that they weren't going to stop, even though they did have an objective limit. So I think they're really practical tips, from my point of view.
Adrian, I've spoken to a lot of auctioneers. Something that's just sort of made me realise perhaps what somebody could do, maybe they're not an arrogant sort of a person, but if they take on that persona of being quite arrogant, quite loud, sort of bolshy, straight to increasing that bid as soon as the competitor throws one in, just rampant fire, that's probably going to help, isn't it? Sort of acting arrogant if you're not.
Absolutely. And that's why the quicker you're bidding, the more confidently you're bidding, the more vocal and, the more energy and ebullience you've got, definitely creates a perception of strength. Call it arrogance, call it dominance. Either way, it definitely works. I've seen it firsthand.
Yes, take on the role of the street bully. You're there to get that property no matter what. Right, let's have a look at some price guides, and people they've got to get their heads around this. So what sort of advice can you throw up when price guides are being deployed?
Look, it's a good question, and obviously a bit of a hot topic at the moment, especially in New South Wales around underquoting. So the objective definition, Craig, of underquoting is when an owner signs a listing authority at, say, 900,000 and the agent provides a price guide of 800,000. So that's deliberate objective underquoting, which would attract a breach from fair trading, okay? However, if an owner signs a listing authority with a price guide of 900,000 and the property sells for 1.1, that's not objectively underquoting. That just means the agent marketed the property extremely well, presented the property well, attracted a lot of competition, and the property just happened to sell for the market value, because auction is the formula and probably the most efficient and effective formula for delivering market value. So it doesn't mean the agent necessarily got it wrong. It just means that the market between the day they listed it and the day it sold could have shifted, because some of these campaigns can be 4 to 6 weeks. It's important for everyone to realise what the objective definition of underquoting is, and the difference between that and a property selling above expectations.
And just finally, before I let you go, between now and Christmas, just how hot do you think the auction market of Sydney is going to get?
Numbers don't lie, and we as a nation are down 19% on inventory or stock, if you like, over the last 5-year aggregate period for this time over the last 5 years. So the supply and demand, rudimentary ratio, economics 101 really is the most important metric in terms of what determines pricing. It's not interest rates, in my opinion. It's not external factors like elections or geopolitical issues. It really is supply and demand. So if we're looking at 20% down in stock, effectively that will eventuate into a decent clearance rate. And frankly, this entire calendar year, the national clearance rate have been hovering around that 70 to 75%. And I don't see that changing, Craig, between now and the end of the year. If anything, that'll probably creep up, in my opinion, probably more towards that 80%, just given that we're in a downwards trajectory on rates, which really is more of a confidence boost than a direct impact on borrowing capacity.
Adrian Bo, a lot of experience there, over 35 years in the real estate market, and one of the top auctioneers operating in the Sydney property market. Hey, enjoy your Friday, enjoy the upcoming weekend and any auctions that you might be calling, and thanks for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning.
Absolute pleasure, Craig. Thanks for having me.
Every morning from 6 a.m, we bring you the latest real estate news with diverse perspectives from leading industry experts. We deliver the most property podcasts across Australia every week.
So the RBA on Tuesday, their decision was predicted. I'm the eternal optimist. I did say that there was an outside chance that the RBA might drop the rate.
What is your message to a family who can't get into the property market now for a first home, but with the same income, combined family income, could have gotten into the property market 20 years ago?
It's a very, very difficult situation, David, and as an individual and as a citizen, I think we're in a very difficult position with the property market, and I don't actually think most reasonable people think that this is a good outcome. Having said that, there's nothing that I can do personally about it. We don't target housing prices.
After a pandemic where you threw billions of dollars at the property market.
So, yes, you're quite right. That is part of the transmission mechanism monetary policy. Can we impact housing prices, or should we impact housing prices? No, we have to focus on our mandate, which is inflation.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.